Here's Craig Button, our director of scouting. So it is back-to-back Stanley Cups for the Florida Panthers. Craig, first of all, what can you say about Bill Zito and Paul Maurice and this entire organization, just the way they have taken care of business the past couple of seasons?
Well, I want to rewind to the end of the 22 playoff season for the Florida Panthers. They had won the President's Trophy. They got to the second round and got demolished by the Tampa Bay Lightning, scoring but 3 goals in a 4-game sweep. Bill Zito said, this ain't carrying forth any further. He made a huge trade to acquire Matthew Tkachuk. That was after Jonathan Huberdeau had set a record for most points by a left winger in NHL history. And what Bill Zito demonstrated was that we're not going to just be happy being good. We're not going to just be happy being very good. Our goal is to be champions. And to be champions, you need to be bold. And you need to take risks. But Bill Zito has looked at his team. He's looked at acquiring players that are competitive. If you want to be a competitive team, Jay, you better get competitive players. And the Florida Panthers, their lineup is dotted with competitive players. In fact, you will not find a player in their lineup that isn't competitive.
And Greg, you mentioned Matthew Tkachuk. I just wanted to point out, post-game, he mentioned that he tore the abductor muscle off his bone, also had a hernia on the same side. I know everyone's playing hurt, but that sounds extremely painful, Greg, doesn't it?
It does, and if we go back to the 23 Stanley Cup final, when he got hit by Keegan Kolesar and he had the rib and the chest injury, and he just couldn't go anymore. The fact that he was able to ramp up as the series went on, I think it speaks volumes about, you know, a player that was finding a way to feel a little bit better, finding a way to be a lot more productive. And certainly these players in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the deeper you go, are playing with injuries. Matthew Tkachuk was no difference. In the first few games of this series, the first 2 games up in Edmonton, you know, Sasha Barkov, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk really were not at their best. And the series was 1-1. And since that point in time, those 3 found their game. They found their game big time. And quite frankly, the Edmonton Oilers were never able to find an answer for that trio, for the third line, for the forecheck, for the pressure from the defense to Bobrovsky. Simply overwhelmed by the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. They lose their 2nd straight Cup final to the Panthers. Craig, you've been on the winning side in Stanley Cup finals. You've been on the losing side in Stanley Cup finals. So I feel like, you know, you're uniquely qualified to speak to this. Can you feel for what the Oilers organization is going through right now?
Yeah, and that includes everybody, from the ownership to the president to the manager, coaches, players. And you go this far, and you literally lay it all on the line. You give every ounce of energy you have to try to win the championship. And you knocked out in the first round. It's disappointing, second round. But to lose in the Stanley Cup final was really difficult. Anton Lundell was simply brilliant in this series. He was part of that third line that just simply took it to the Edmonton Oilers, and the Oilers never could find a chance to answer to that third line. But when we go to the Edmonton Oilers, and Connor McDavid talked about it post-game, he said, this is a really good team. And he said, you know, the way they play, they got on top of us. They didn't give us space. And when you consider the Edmonton Oilers recognizing that they played against the Florida Panthers team last year and fell short, this was a stronger Florida Panthers team. Yep. And it felt to me, listening to the players from the Edmonton Oilers, that they recognized that they were really up against it. Listen, I want to give the Edmonton Oilers some real big props. I thought they were first-round fodder heading into this year's playoffs. Mm-hmm. I was not a believer. And through the first 2 games versus the LA Kings, they didn't make anybody a believer. But they found their game. They had some injuries, and they found their game. And I think that deserves a lot of accolades, and it deserves the respect, because they earned that respect and they got this far. But I don't think this series was as close as maybe people think. 6 games, Jay, never at the end of regulation were the Edmonton Oilers leading the game. In the first period of the last 4 games, they've been outscored 9-0 and 13-4 overall in the 6 games. And you're chasing a game. You never found a way to get the Florida Panthers uncomfortable. So as good as the Edmonton Oilers were in getting to the Stanley Cup final, and as close as it seemed, it really wasn't that close because the Florida Panthers, especially in the last 2 games, just simply throttled the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Craig, I know for a lot of fans of the team, they desperately wanted Edmonton to acquire a goaltender at the deadline with some experience, maybe even some playoff experience. They stuck with Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. Man, they were brilliant at times throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Ultimately, though, were they a major reason why the Oilers lost in the Stanley Cup final?
I don't think it was a major reason, Jay. I think it was a reason. I think it's an area that they have to look at very closely, and they have to change it. The bottom line is you cannot have below-average goaltending and expect to win the Stanley Cup. The fact that they got as far as they did using these 2 goaltenders in, out, Skinner struggled early in that Los Angeles series. Pickard found his way. Skinner came back. But this is a recurring theme for the Edmonton Oilers. You asked me about, experience and everything that goes through with a team and an organization. The New York Islanders were a really, really good team in the late 70s, and they couldn't find a way to win. And ultimately, Bill Torrey made a fantastic trade in acquiring Butch Goring, and away they went. I think the Oilers have to look at 2 areas of their team to give themselves a better chance to compete for the Stanley Cup. Because I believe, Jay, that they have 10, 11 really good players, but they don't have the depth of the Florida Panthers. They got to change their goaltending. They got to improve it. I'm not saying you change Skinner, but the tandem has to change. It's not good enough. And the bottom group of those players, they lost speed with the absence of Fogle and McLeod and Holloway, and they never replaced that speed. And they can talk about being heavier and everything. Well, their heavy never was heavy. So they got to look at really improving their depth because they got 2 of the best players on the planet, if not the 2 best players on the planet. And if they want to go deeper, and again, I'm going to emphasize, they have 10, 11 really good players. No Zach Hyman in the final, which hurt them.
Yep.
But they're going to have to build out the bottom end of their forward group, and they're going to have to change their goaltending, or it's going to be deja vu all over again for the Edmonton Oilers.
Can I ask, you mentioned Zach Hyman. How big of a difference was it not having, I mean, we know it was a big difference, but could it have been the difference, Craig, had Hyman played?
So 3 things I'm going to go to, Jay. We talked about the goaltending. So 3 reasons they were not able to really get the Florida Panthers uncomfortable or really challenge them. Goaltending wasn't good enough, clearly behind Bobrovsky. Number 2, their depth. Their bottom 2 lines, Jay, in the final gave them nothing. Gave them absolutely nothing. No energy, no physical play, no catalyst-type play, no way to make the Florida Panthers uncomfortable. And then not having Zach Hyman. He's a difference maker. He's physical. He can score. He has that energy. And it allows if you want to load up McDavid and Draisaitl, it allows him to slide in and give you real strength behind those 2 guys. So those 3 reasons for me were significant reasons why this team lost in the Stanley Cup final. Not one carrying it over the other, but when you combine the 3, it became a massive win for the Florida Panthers. And
for the 31st season in a row, a Canadian team does not hoist the Stanley Cup. Craig Button, thanks.